Welcome to the second Storytime with HannahMary live read aloud. Today we get a chapter from The Raider's Promise, which is the fifth book in the series of Viking Quest by Lois Walfrid Johnson. She is actually a local author to me in Minnesota, and this is my favorite of her series. She wrote several series for children and youth. This one tends to be more the youth series, as the main character ages from, I think, 13 to 17 or something like that over the course of the series. So the main character is Irish, but it ends up being very Viking oriented because she is captured by Viking raiders and made a slave. The reason I'm reading this today is because it's Leif Erikson Day. Happy Leif Erikson Day. Have you ever heard of Leif Erikson? He was a Viking explorer, the son of Eric the Red. And Eric the Red is kind of an infamous character, but he was banished to the island of Greenland, and his son, Leif Erikson, ended up being somewhat of a missionary to Greenland from Norway. And this all took place nearly around the year 1000. Then in here we have Leif Erikson and the main characters of the book, the Irish and the Norwegians, ending up finding North America. Well, someone else of the Vikings had found it before then, but they were the first ones. Leif Erikson claims to be among the first to set foot on North America of Europeans. And that was about 500 years before Christopher Columbus. So the reason today is Leif Erikson Day has nothing to do with his life. It's actually because October 9th was the day the first shipload of immigrants arrived in America from Norway. Fun fact. And people didn't know if they could really believe the stories of Leif Erikson and his brother and those who came and settled in Newfoundland around the year 1000 until the 1960s, when archaeologists discovered the remains of their settlement. So if you Google, I have no idea how to pronounce the French name. It's something like Lansaux Meadows. I think it's spelled like that. And that is the historic site in Newfoundland where you can see where they settled. So in this last book of the series, we are in between Greenland and Newfoundland to begin. So here we go. Here's a picture for starters. Leif Erikson, and main characters Mikkel, Norwegian, Bree is Irish, and that might be one of the other Norwegians, or it might be Bree's brother, probably Bree's brother, Devon. From high overhead, Brianna O'Toole heard the cry of a seagull. Pushing aside her reddish blonde hair, Bree looked up to a flash of wings. In that moment, the dangers of the past week seemed far away. With one swoop, the gull landed on the rocky ledge in front of her. Beady eyes upon her, he tipped his head and shrieked again. A moment later, he lifted his wings and was up and away. Bree watched him go. Would she ever feel that free again? Ignoring the uneasiness she felt, Bree watched the gull fly across the water. Early that morning, she and others from Leif Erikson's ship had climbed to the top of this island in the great open sea. As she started back down the steep side, Bree felt the sun on her face and light entered her heart. Then she glanced toward Mikkel. My enemy, Bree thought, out of long habit. But this time she wondered something more. Could he ever become a friend she respected? Only 1 year older than Bree, Mikkel had led a raid that carried off rich treasure from the Glendalough Monastery in Ireland. During that time, his men also captured Bree, her brother, and other Irish from the surrounding countryside. Nearly 4 years had passed since that day late in the 10th century, and Mikkel was now 18. At a wider place between the rocks, he turned. Let's make a new start, he said. A new start? Bree felt the surprise of it. It was his fault that she had become a slave. Do you really think we can? Mikkel looked her straight in the eye. I'm sure of it. His voice spilled over with confidence. "All we have to do is trust each other." "Trust?" Bree stared at him. Like a storm ready to break, the word hung in the air. How could any trust between them possibly last? "That's all?" she asked. "Can't you think of something a bit harder?" Mickle's grin lit up his face. "I'll help you. I'll prove I'm worthy of trust." Of all the things Mickle could promise, that was the hardest to imagine. Yet he stood his ground and didn't even blink. Watching him, Bree wondered how he could feel so sure of himself, especially now when they were about to enter a new world. A world where no one, not even Leif Erikson, could know what would happen. "You'll see," Mickle promised. There it was again, the confidence in his voice that he could win, that he could really be trusted to do what he promised. Maybe, just possibly. If there was anything in the world that Bree wanted, it was being able to believe in Mickle. If that happened, for a moment Bree dared to hope, maybe Mickle would even take her and her brother Devin home. Far below, surrounded by the blue waters of the sea, Leif's ship lay anchored in a cove. Some of the men had stayed behind to guard it. As Bree looked down upon them, her uneasiness returned. "Leif knows the dangers we face," she tried to tell herself. Danger to Mickle and to all of us. Like the others around her, Bree had learned to value the wise and strong leader of their expedition. Just then Mickle spoke again. "Leif's calling." Leaping between the rocks, Mickle led the way back up the steep west side of the island. When they reached the top, Leif stood on a high point, looking across a great expanse of water. With blonde hair and a beard trimmed close to his face, Leif stood taller than most men. Though still a young man, he had earned the respect of everyone who knew him, including the Norwegian king. "There's something I want you to see," Leif's voice was filled with excitement. When his crew gathered around him, Bree remembered that, as a slave, she should stand apart. Instead, she moved forward, wanting to hear every word that Leif said. But Mickle left the others behind. Walking out on a rocky ledge, he looked in every direction. Behind them lay the great expanse of water they had crossed when sailing from Greenland. To their right, the blue coast of a rocky, wooded land, and ahead of them, when he turned to Leif, Mickle's face shone. "A fjord! A waterway leading into the land!" Leif grinned. "A gateway that will help us explore." "And good markers," Mickle pointed off to his left. Like a gigantic ball of rock, the round head of a cape loomed against the horizon. To Mickle's right was another cape. Between that and the round head was a large island with high vertical rock rising from its shore. Beyond lay a long, low point that turned like a beak as it reached into the sea. Landmarks no good Viking would miss, and there, Leif pointed beyond the large island, though far distant, the rocky ridge of a headland offered another marker. For a moment Leif turned, looking back to the great open sea over which they had traveled. On the way here they had gone ashore twice as they sailed south. Now in the strong current along that coast, an iceberg rose from the water. Though the beginning of July, ice from northern glaciers still offered danger to any ship that passed. But Leif's face showed only his excitement. When Thorstein comes, Leif and his brother had planned to travel together. While sailing up the coast of Greenland, Leif had learned that Thorstein was delayed. "He'll follow the same directions from Bjarni that I had," Leif said. "If we're able to use such a good location, he'll find us easily." As Leif faced the channel again, his voice held the satisfaction of discovery. "It's a gateway, I'm sure of it. A fjord that will open up this new land, where ships can sail, explorers will come, and settlers and merchants." Once more Leif pointed across the water, this time to a bay between the rocky ridge and the long point of land that extended like a beak into the sea. With his keen eyesight, he had seen more than the rest of them. "That's where we're going," he said. "Ships will not only be able to see us, whether friend or enemy, we'll be able to see them." Friend or enemy. Again Bree felt a warning. Like a bad memory, her dread returned. What about the enemy inside their group? The man who had tried to hurt Mikkel during their trip here? Starting down between the rocks, Leif led the others. As though he had no thought of the harm that could come to him, Mikkel followed. Son of a Norwegian chieftain, Mikkel often took his rightful place with pride. When the rest of the crew followed, Bree and her brother Devon dropped back. With all her heart, Bree felt excited about the new land they had seen. Yet the possibilities of such a place also made her wonder about her own future. Soon it would be 4 long years since she had been captured and become a slave. What could she do to change her life? Partway to the ship, Devon stopped and turned around. Though Bree had inherited their mother's brown eyes and reddish blonde hair, Devon had the black hair and deep blue eyes of the dark Irish. Like Mikkel, Devon was also 18. As though understanding how Bree felt, Devon offered a brotherly wink. "Remember," he said, "don't forget who you really are." In her heart, Bree added the words she knew well, "The daughter of a wise and powerful chieftain who loves me very much." "Yes, Dev, I know," Bree said aloud. Even when most angry with Mikkel, she had not blurted out the truth. Afraid that her ransom would go even higher, she had never told Mikkel about her father. Only Bree, Devon, and the Irish captured with them knew the well-kept secret. Now Bree hugged it to herself. When she entered this new land, she would remember. Though I seem to be a slave, inside I am free, and I won't let anyone take that from me. Now you maybe noticed I got a note in the middle of that, and that is that my county says to seek shelter immediately because we have a severe thunderstorm rolling in. So my family's watching and I have to be prepared to stop at any moment. But that is the first chapter of The Raider's Promise by Lois Walfrid Johnson. And I left you hanging because, I can't read the whole book on here, but this is the biggest book of the whole series. It covers so much ground. There's so much for the characters to learn and grow and change in this. And will Bree get back to Ireland? I won't ask any more spoiler questions because that gives spoilers for the rest of the series, because you actually need to start at book 1 to make sense of this all and get to know the characters. And each book just gets better and better, written better and better, and with better themes and characters, and I just highly recommend it. So here's book 4, where they start getting connected with Leif Erikson in Iceland, or actually in Norway, and then in Iceland they are at they're at a huge conference of Iceland when Iceland actually voted to become a Christian nation in the year 1000. And that is in the 4th book, and then in the 5th book we follow them beyond that. So I hope you can read it and enjoy it, and let me know what you think. I'd better go now and get out of the way of a storm.